of Brachot. We're doing page or daf 53 of Brachot. The first thing we're going to do is, why do we make a bracha on fire during the Havdalah on Saturday night? Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about the reason why we do it and some of the details. Most of tonight's topics are going to focus on Havdalah, and a few are going to focus on the debates between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, particularly when it comes to a specific place where you ate, in terms of where you have to make the Birchat Hamazon. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, there is quite a bit of psychology, a little bit of magic, and intriguing things and backstories to today's daf. So let's take a look at the Gemara, and we start off with the Gemara that's talking about this idea that the fire that you use for Havdalah had to be a fire that had kept Shabbos, Ner Shabbos, the fire that kept Shabbos. Interestingly enough, it doesn't mean that it literally had to have been around the whole Shabbos, and you didn't violate the Shabbos with that fire. That would be the case once a year by Havdalah of Yom Kippur. And if we have a time, we'll talk about why that is. There is a reason, and it's based on the topic of today. But to understand why the fire had to rest, let's understand the broader meaning of why we need a candle at all. So the answer to that question is primarily in another Gemara, the Gemara in Pesachim. And the Gemara in Pesachim is on 42 of Pesachim. Intriguing Gemara. And there's also a Gemara in the Yerushalmi on this tractate on Brachot that fills in even more than the Gemara in Pesachim in some regards. So basically, the Gemara in Pesachim says that what happened is that after Shabbos, there was no light. Adam was created Friday, and there was, according to the Gemara, there was this extraordinary light that permeated the world all the full day of Friday, the full day of Friday night, and the full day of Saturday until nightfall. And when Adam finished the Shabbos together with Eve, that light disappeared and it became dark. And you have to remember, this is the first time Adam experienced darkness, and there was already a curse about the enmity between him and the snake. The snake would try to bite him at the foot. And you could just imagine all of the pitch dark, right? It's the beginning of the month, so there's not really much of a moon to see at. And there's all of these animals making all of these scary noises. And then, of course, there's the snake. Snake is the number one enemy. And Adam was literally, he was just petrified. He didn't know what to do. So in his fear, he started praying out to God. And God basically placed in front of him two stones and gave him the insight that he can hit these stones together and produce the sparks that would create a fire. you don't have to believe the story on just the most literal level to understand the psychological significance of a story like this. It's a very powerful story. It's telling us that there's a part of us that is fearful, and then we have a gift, and we can recognize the gift as divine insight into how to take action to create something in which we can navigate our fears, because we create, in this case, illumination, light, and we can see what's happening. We can scare away the scary things and so on. And obviously, scaring away the scary things could mean not just physically, but also psychologically. Now, once he did that, he thanked God. He blessed God on the spot. So this little story tells us a number of intriguing facts that until today affect both the halacha, both the law, and also the inner meaning of what we're doing when we make the blessing of Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh, the blessing on God creating the fire, or the various parts of the fire, the different colors and so on that we mentioned earlier in the earlier daf, that we do on every Saturday night. And the following is what I would venture to say. That is this blessing a regular blessing of a Birchat Hana'ah. Birchat Hana'ah is defined as a blessing that we make when we're benefiting from the world. It's generally associated with eating and drinking. One of the few exceptions of something that we're consuming without eating or drinking, that we make a Birchat Hanenin, which is plural for Hana'ah, to benefit from, is when we make a blessing on different good-smelling items, that there is a Barim Nebesamim, which is a catch-all for good spices. There are the more details that we discussed earlier for other specific things. But by and large, that's a category that you don't make a blessing for the fact that it's a nice day out, or that the weather is good, although you enjoy the good weather, do you make a blessing on the morning and the evening? And that you kind of do, and it's an interesting category of a blessing, because that's part of the Birchat Kriya Shema, is where we talk about the day and the night. So in a sense, that does cover the idea that it's day and that it's night, but it's not a regular Birchat Hanenin. It's not a regular blessing of benefit, but it you could say it also includes that. You don't have to make a bracha for bodily functions that happen automatically. I remember many years ago somebody said, if any benefit that benefits you, you should make a blessing on. Isn't the greatest benefit that you're alive because you're breathing every moment? So you should make a blessing on every breath. And the answer to that is, well, those things are automatic, and you say, you kind of cover most of those things when you say Elokai Neshama Shenasata Bi. You wake up in the morning and you say, God, thank you for giving me my soul, and that it's like I was almost like I was dead, basically, and you revived me. Or we say blessings for being able to see, Pokeach Ivrim. I don't know if you could really call those regular Birchat Hanenim, or more Birchat Shvach, just kind of acknowledging and praising God. And there's some that have a little bit of an element of both. Which category is the bracha on fire? And the commentaries say it's not a regular blessing on Hana'ah, on benefit. You're not getting that tangible of a benefit. You're able to see, but that's not a tangible benefit. Otherwise, you'd have to make a bracha every night when you lit a candle, or perhaps every time you walked into a room that had a lit candle from the dark, or you turned on a light, and you'd have to make many brachot. It's not that category. Now, is it a Birchat HaMitzvah? Is it a blessing on a mitzvah? The Gemara says in what we're going to do, number 5, that it isn't. So, okay, the Gemara says that, so who are we to argue with the Gemara? It's not like a regular mitzvah, so which one is it then? Which category is it? And the answer is basically brought down by various Rishonim, and it's based on the Gemara and the Yerushalmi, and the Gemara Msachim. And what it basically says is that Gemara Psachim introduced the idea of fire being created on Saturday night. We don't generally make a blessing every day of the week when a particular thing was created in the 6 days of creation. So this would be an exception because it was forbidden in use for the duration of Shabbos, and then it becomes permitted on Saturday night. So in a sense, every week the ability to make fire and use fire is taken away from us, and we get it back on Saturday night. So in a sense, we are living almost like Adam, where we don't have something and now we have the ability to have it or to do it, to use it. And that requires a blessing. It's the combination of what happened to Adam and that's happening to us, which leads me to say that the power, we can't underestimate the power and the psychology of what wanting something so much more because we can't have it or we can't do it. So that's the first and foremost reason why you make the bracha b'mora'esh, is you now have something you didn't have before, and that isn't just, now you can say, well, anytime you get something, let's say I fasted today and I'm going to eat a big dinner, I maybe I should make an additional blessing that I now am eating for the first time today. The answer is you make the bracha for the food. You don't have to make an extra bracha because you didn't have it and now you have it. But since the fire is reminiscent of Adam and Eve, it's that you combine those two things together, and that creates the unique quality. And that answers a lot of questions that come up of why you're not, in fact, required to look for fire. We'll talk about that later. Why there's certain restrictions in the fire, of why the fire had to have kept Shabbos, is because the whole point of the fire is that you didn't use it. It wasn't used in violation of Shabbos. So once it was used in the violation of Shabbos, then it doesn't work. And the Gemara discusses that at great length, where it basically says that a non-Jew who has a fire after Shabbos, you can't use it. And the reason is that on a certain level, the whole world should really be keeping Shabbos, according to Rashi at least. It's a controversial position. Many of the other commentators don't agree with Rashi. And anybody, Jew and even non-Jew to some level, who violates the Shabbos with a fire, didn't recognize their ability to be a witness, bear testimony to God being the creator in 6 days and resting on the Shabbos. And therefore, we don't want to make that blessing on that fire. That's how Rashi learns it. We talked about that at the end of 52. Now, what about if the non-Jew had a fire and the Jew lit something from the non-Jew's fire? The Talmud says that is okay. What if a Jew had a fire and a non-Jew lit the fire from the Jew? Again, the Talmud says it's okay. Well, what if a non-Jew had the fire, meaning it was lit, he lit it on Shabbat, right? Most non-Jews don't keep Shabbat, right? And then another non-Jew lights his own fire from the fire. He uses, they touch torches, and he lights up his torch from the first non-Jew's fire. Then the Talmud says you can't use it for Bar Mar'esh. The Gemara analyzes, well, which one is it? if we say the fire is transferred, so then even if a Jew got it from a non-Jew, it should not be able to be in use. So the Gemara says no, because the fire isn't really transferred, because it's additional fire. It's burning something new. It might have some connection to the original fire, but it's not the same fire. In fact, the Gemara says any fire after some time it renews itself. It's not the same. It's not exactly the same. It's like it's burning new things, and it's somewhat new, or it's not entirely new. It's additional fire. It's called. So the question then becomes: so if that's the case, a non-Jew who got it lit from another non-Jew, but after Shabbos, even though it started, the original non-Jew had it lit on Shabbos, that should, in theory, be clear that you're allowed to use it. The Gemara says the reason is because we're afraid that people won't know the difference, and they'll come to use some non-Jew's fire that was lit on Shabbos. And the question is, that's a decree on top of a decree. It's like a double fence. Even the original non-Jew, really in theory, if the fire was lit for 20, 30 minutes, by then it's not considered the original fire. It's renewed itself. It's additional fire. So it's all because of a very narrow scenario that the non-Jew lit the fire the moment before Shabbos, and then a moment later, it's still the same flame, and you make the bracha on it. So it sounds like a decree for a decree, but the answer is that when the rabbis make these takanot, they're allowed to, especially according to the Rambam, have in mind a variety of levels if that's what they think is necessary. Once the decree is made, we don't enact a second decree on top of that. As long as the original decree was made with all of these steps in mind, then it's considered one decree. And that answers a lot of questions. Okay, that's number one. Number two. Go to number two. So number two is as follows. This is a great one. Tanu Rabbanan, how Yoshvim bebeis hamedrash reviu ar lifneim. The rabbis taught. There's a bunch of students in the yeshiva. They're sitting, and they didn't make the Bari Moreh Ha'esh yet, and somebody brings in a fire. It's a Saturday night. And that's what yeshiva students do on Saturday night. They have a special seder. They have a special learning session then. And Beis Shammai omrim kol echad ve'echad mevarach la'atzmo. Beis Shammai says each person goes independently and makes the blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam bori moreh ha'esh, without interrupting the whole room. You don't have a group reading or a leader saying the blessing and everybody answering Amen. Beis Hill says no. They make an announcement. We're going to make the blessing on the fire. Everyone quiets down, and that one person makes the blessing, and they say Amen. Mishum shenema b'rov am hadras melech, because as it says in Mishlei that the honor to the king is with the multitude, with a big group energy. So Beis Shammai gave his reason. Notice, wouldn't it be nicer if you've got 100 people listening to the same blessing, saying Amen to that blessing, is giving more honor to God? Now the Gemara says Bishlam Beis Hill mefarshi taima. Fine, Beis Hill gave his reasoning. Ela Beis Shammai my taima. What's the reason behind Beis Shammai to say everybody has to do it individually. Kasavi bittul beis medrash. He holds that it's going to spend too much time people interrupting their studies. Rashi says that the time that one makes the blessing for all, they have to be quiet from their learning, so that they can all have intention and hear him. V'yanu amen, and they answer amen. Some of the commentaries say that means it's only, they have to make the bracha anyway, but it's only one extra word, amen, for an extra 2 seconds. Other commentaries say to get a room of 50 or 100 people quiet, it could take a minute or 2 or 3. So it's really, 3 minutes of bittul Torah. Okay, so Beis Hillel says we're more interested in the group, and Beis Shammai says it's not that Beis Shammai has no regard for the group energy, but not if it comes at the expense of bittul Torah, of not being able to study as much Torah. So, Tanya Nami Hachi, a proof text from a story seems to indicate that Beis Shammai has a point, which is strange because usually we don't pay attention to Beis Shammai when he argues on Beis Hillel. What's the story? It's about Beit Rabbi Gamliel. It's about the household, the family of Rabbi Gamliel. They wouldn't say the equivalent of Gesundheit. Merapa is from the language of refuah, of healing, health. There's a custom brought down in ancient sources, and it's even discussed in ancient sources, whether it's a Jewish custom, but by and large it's also a Jewish custom, which is when somebody sneezes, you say something to the effect of what we now say called Gesundheit. Gesundheit means Gesund means health. So we wish the person health. And the reason that's given is because originally in the time of Abraham, people would die very suddenly. The expression was they would die with a sneeze. The sneeze was literally their soul flying out of their body. And Abraham prayed that he shouldn't have to die like that. He wanted to prepare for his death, and his request was granted. So now every time somebody sneezes, to remind ourselves that it's a blessing that we live and don't just die from a sneeze, we say Gesundheit. So that's what's brought down in the Medrash. Why we bring this story? To show you that Reb Gamliel, they value Torah study so much that even if you're just sitting in the Beis Medrash, which is not a place where you socialize, instead you teach Torah, you don't interrupt, or you don't even say Gesundheit in the Beis Medrash. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of Rov Am Hadras Melech, the glory of the king. It's implied from here that in general, when you're doing a mitzvah, we do strive for Birov Am Hadras Melech. We do try to do things communally. So let's look at some of the brachot, because let's keep the focus on blessings of what we do communally. So, for example, nowadays we make Havdalah communally. By the way, there's a whole conversation of what about Havdalah? Why are they only discussing fire? So the Mishnah Brura and other sources talk about, well, that was the case, either because nobody had wine yet, or maybe they already had Havdalah, and they didn't have the fire yet. So if you didn't have the fire, the law is you make the Bari Maresh all of Saturday night. You don't have to do it Sunday night, the rest of the week. Only one night a week, Saturday night. It should be done. The law is we do it all together, but that was actually originally a debate. There were some rabbis who say you do them individually, they don't have to be done together. That's no longer the case. We always bundle them together, unless for some reason you don't have access to one of them, and later on you have access to it, then you do the other. Let's say you don't have the fire, so you make it later. So that would be the case here. So, Kiddush, what about Kiddush? So there we find already a debate that there are some people who, most religious Jews make one Kiddush for the whole community, or if there's a group of people in a group setting for a group dinner, group lunch, a Kiddush, and the same thing in a household. But there are some who have the custom to make individual Kiddush. And part of that has to do with what is Kiddush? Is Kiddush drinking wine, or is Kiddush all about Shabbos? Because if you're drinking wine, for example, the custom isn't to make a bracha of wine for everyone. And the reason is because when it's birchas hanenin, when it's a blessing for benefit, usually in most cases, each person makes the blessing when they're benefiting. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is it's your benefit, do it as it suits you. And you don't really fulfill other people's obligation. Unless you really are sharing the benefits. So for example, if you're eating bread together and you're reclining, which is what they used to do to show that they're not just happen to be eating in the same room at the same time, but they're really one group and they're cohesive in their eating. They're going to eat in a unified way. So by showing that adhesion, the group can lead them in a blessing on bread or wine. And there's a whole conversation at how wine works, but in general, we don't say that. In general, people are just drinking. If you're if you come up and there's some wine out and another guy comes up and he has some wine, you don't make a hagafen and have him in mind, because you're just met and you're doing your thing. You're not a group per se. You're not a drinking group. It has to be very formal. So do we look at Kiddush like drinking in general, and then everybody should make their own bracha? But if you look at Kiddush like a regular Brachot mitzvah, maybe you would argue you should do it B'rov Matras Melech. There are other explanations of why there are different customs there as well. But that's number two. We'll go on to number three. And that has to do with Besamim. The other thing we do along with the Bari Mara Eish is we do Bari Mini Besamim. We make a special blessing on good smelling spices, allspice, or usually we do it on cloves, and that's to restore the soul, which a little bit of the extra soul when it leaves us, because we have an extra soul on Shabbos. When it leaves us, the Talmud tells us, it leaves us when Shabbos departs, and because of that, we're a little bit sad. So to revive us, we just like anybody who's a little weak, a good smell revives their soul. So we make that bracha on something that smells really good. Now, the Gemara says, what's good and what besides for it smelling good and not bad, are there some criteria of things that we don't want to make the bracha on? The Gemara says in number 3 that there are. So towards the bottom of 53a, the Gemara says, if you have besamim, you have things that smell good, but they're meant for the bathroom to take away the foul odor, that you should not make a bracha on. And the same thing would be if there was a dead body and they had something to make the body take away the bad smell, you don't make a bracha on that. So anything that's there to remove a bad odor, to mask a bad odor, even though it happens to also give a good odor, that's not enough. You look at what its main function is. If its main function is to remove something bad, something nasty, you don't make a bracha on it. There are other categories also that if it's work besamim, they used to make like clothing or other things that they would have incense, and the incense would get absorbed by the clothing or the articles that they were fashioning so that they would smell good. So those are working incense. They're not for the sake of smelling, even though you want the clothing to smell good, but they're being worked on, so you wouldn't make the blessing on that either. What about if you went into a spice shop? Could you make the bracha on the spices? And the Gemara says you can. And the Gemara says, well, that's strange, because there presumably the spices in the spice shop are not there for you to smell. They're there to sell. And if you either you buy them, if you buy them and take them home, good, then they're yours, then you smell them. In the meantime, it's almost like it's almost like you're annoying the shop owner because you're going and you're smelling it, and you're not buying it necessarily. The Gemara says no. The Gemara says the intention of the shop owner is that people should want to go in to smell, because that's good for business. And in fact, I think they actually say today that if you want to do well, make sure your place of business smells well, even if you're not selling spices for a living. But for sure, if you are a spice salesperson and you have a showroom, you want everyone to want to go there because it smells great, because the word will get out. And that's to me, that's a little bit of a capitalistic view, but a healthy one, which says that when you sell something, there's a psychology of how to sell. People smell the thing and they want to buy it because it smells great. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if they didn't go in with the intention, like, I need this with the shopping list, they go by and they're drawn to the smell. And once they're there, you call it an impulse purchase. Okay, that's part of life. So that's number 3 about Besamim, and understanding motives and how the rabbis understood motives and the psychology of sales. Number 4 is on Nun Gimel Amud Beis. We turn the page, and it says the following. There's a debate about whether you have to benefit from the fire. And most commentaries say that you should be able to get close enough to potentially benefit, not actually benefit as much as be able to see something by the use of the fire. And what is it that you have to see? So the Gemara records the rabbi saying you have to be able to recognize the difference between 2 coins, ben iser lepundion, or meluzma shel teveri and meluzma shel tzipori. They're different coins, ancient coins. So let's just say today it would be the difference between a nickel or a quarter. In the pitch dark, unless you can really know you have a good sense of their feel, you can't tell the difference. Let's say, especially if you're not holding them, they're in front of you. You can't tell the difference. You can maybe see there are coins, but you can't see them well enough to know which one's a quarter and which one's a nickel. So you need some light to see it. The Gemara in Psachim, I believe, it's the Gemara in Psachim or the Yerushalmi on Brachot, says there are other examples given, like you're looking at a cup and you could see the liquid versus the cup. When you're always looking at the cup, how much liquid is in it, and you can't really see in the dark. You have to feel it. You can't see it. So can you see it? Now, what do we do today? What we do today is we hold up our hands and we look at our fingernails compared to our nails. By the way, there's different customs. One is to hold your fingers inward, and the other one is to hold them outward. Our custom is to do both. Okay, there's a Kabbalistic reason for that. So why do we do that? So the simple reason is, it's Motzei Shabbat. We don't have coins, and therefore you use the thing that's the most accessible, your hands. There's another reason, is that it's already brought in Pirkei Rabbi Elazar that midrashic teaching about that from Adam he extended his hand. So this is idea of extending the hand. That might also be reminiscent of the idea of the Bari Mara Eish represents your hand, your ability. That's one teaching. Another teaching is that the nails grow. So that's the mitzvah of pru'ervu, of being fruitful and multiplying, and not just biologically, but also increasing our knowledge and our wealth and our friendships and so on, to increase. A third reason brought down by the Meiri actually was I thought about this, and I was happy to see that somebody else thought about it 800 years ago. The Meiri says it's reminiscent of the difference between Adam before the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve, and after the tree of knowledge. We once had kisnot or. We had a jacket, we had clothing, but it was or. It was like kind of like a fingernail, translucent, but a little bit harder. And that was taken away and replaced with with skin. So that's midrashic teaching brought down. The Meiri brings that down. So they were kind of like comparing our present state to our fall from grace of the eating of the tree of knowledge. So that's the third reason. So we're going to continue. That's number 4. Now we're going to go to number 5. The Gemara says in number 5 that Amar Rav, Ein machzirin al ha'ar, k'derech shemachzirin al ha'mitzvot. Rav made a statement that you don't have to go look for fire the way you'd look for another mitzvah. So, for example, if I left my tefillin somewhere and now I'm in another place, I don't have my tefillin, I go and find tefillin. I go borrow tefillin from the local Chabad house or find somebody from Jew as tefillin, explain to the situation, ask them if I can borrow the tefillin. Or if I don't have a lulav and esrog, I borrow it. Matana manas lahachzer. I do whatever I can to have access to a mitzvah that I don't have at hand. Why is Bari Mara Eish any different? Because it's not actually, Bari Mara Eish. Why is it any different? Because we said before, we already answered this question, but we're going to go a little deeper. Is that it's not really a regular mitzvah. It's like an opportunity to praise God that happens once a week on Motzei Shabbat, reminiscent of what happened to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, or as they were basically actually kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and that was part of it. Basically, the story is being kicked out of the Garden of Eden and experiencing night and potential death and all of those things. Now, that's, if we have it, we make a blessing, but we're not required to go look for it. And I have a little bit of an insight here that I want to share with you, which is that's the blessing of receiving something that you didn't have and felt the void of. It's like eating after not eating for a day. It's very special, but do you need to look out? Should you need to start fasting every day so that you could enjoy your food? Not necessarily. So if that's what happened, great. If you have access to fire, make that blessing. But if you don't have it, you don't have to go out of your way. So that's my interpretation of saying the idea of rejuvenating by not having something and then having it. If you didn't have it and you still don't have it, you'll get it, whatever, it's fine. You don't have to go out of your way for that. It'll just kind of even itself out. Another possible explanation is that these mitzvot, they're not mitzvot, but they're appropriate. They make a lot of sense based on the Yerushalmi because they're subservient to the Havdalah. The Havdalah is the mitzvah. You go out of your way to get the wine, to make the Havdalah. That you go out of your way because that's a mitzvah. Why is it subservient to the Havdalah? Because there's a concept of the light of the fire that we're using is reminiscent of the idea of God separating light from darkness and fire from non-fire, for that matter. So there's this idea that perhaps it's somehow connected to the period of Saturday night, as we already talked about, and even to the Havdalah in particular. So you do it when you can, but if you can't do it, you don't have to do it. However, despite the Gemara, many of the Rishonim say you should make effort to do it. How much effort? You don't have to make a great effort, but you should make effort. Let's say you have a neighbor, and you're on good terms with your neighbor. You borrow eggs and milk all the time from the neighbor, so get a pair of matches from the neighbor. If you have a neighbor that hates you, then you're not required to do it. So even the ones who require you to do it don't necessarily require you to do it with the same level of intensity that you might have to do other mitzvot. But you should make, the custom is to try to make a little bit of an effort to do it. Okay, that is number 5, and number 6 is. By the way, just one more addition. You also don't have to look for spices. And the reason is because the besamim are to revive you because you're a little bit down, and you're not required to do that. We want to be helpful to you, but if you don't have them, you don't have them, it's okay. You're not required to make to go out to the store to buy them. When you go shopping the next time, you get them, you'll have them, you'll use them the next Saturday night. Number 6 is Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. What happens if you're in a particular place, you've eaten, and then you leave that place? Do you have to go back? Are you eating like a meal with bread? Do you have to go back to the original place to make Brachot HaMazon, or could you make Brachot HaMazon wherever you are? So the Gemara says like this. First, the Gemara says, Beit Shammai says you have to go back, and Beit Hillel says you don't have to go back. That's already in the Mishnah. But Rab Zvid says that if the person intentionally left, meaning they ate and they're like, well, I don't want a bench right now. I'm just going to go somewhere else. Then they really are required to go back because they left wrongly. And the Gemara talks about that, and then it says that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had an exchange of why they each had their opinion. And Beis Hillel challenged Beis Shammai and says, if somebody ate on top of a very tall building, let's say they ate on top of the Empire State Building, and they forgot, and they went all the way down. They took the elevator, or the stairs even, 100 stories, and they didn't make a bracha. Are you telling me they have to go back up to the 100th floor of the Empire State Building? And Beis Shammai tells to Beis Hillel, what are you talking about? If you went up to the Empire State Building and you accidentally took out your wallet to buy something and you left it there, wouldn't you go back up? Now, if you do that for yourself, why wouldn't you do that to honor God? So, okay. So which one do we do? Now, usually we always say, unless there's an exception, and the Gemara, the Mishnah points out the exception, we follow Beis Hillel. Not only that, we say that Beis Shammai b'makom, Beis Hillel in a Mishnah, that it's like not even considered like a Mishnah, like when Beis Hillel says something, Beis Shammai's words is almost like disregarded. And not only that, there was a Gemara earlier in Brachot, I think it was Rabbi Tarfon, that said that because he didn't listen to Hillel and he followed Shammai's advice when it came to saying the Shema lying down at night, which is what Shammai says, he endangered his own life. So that's a very radical thing, and yet there are Rishonim and Gaonim that rule seemingly like Shammai in this instance. Very good question. So to answer that question, why would they do that? Let's first look further into the Gemara itself. And the Gemara says the following two stories. The first story is that there were two students that, I'm only going to do the first story now, and we'll do the second story as part of number 7, one of them accidentally forgot to do the Brachot HaMazon and left, and then remembered that he had forgotten, and then he went back and he followed the stricter rule, and he was rewarded that he found a valuable golden item. And then there was another student who intentionally said, I don't feel like benching now, maybe I'll do it later. And he just took off, and he followed Beis Hillel, but not even, according to the Talmud's understanding, really what Beis Hillel says. And he got eaten by a lion. Now, that doesn't make any sense, the story, because first of all, it's a ridiculously extreme punishment. It doesn't make any sense at all. But that's how the Gemara works. The Gemara, it's like a metaphor, like somebody, picked their nose and then they got hit by lightning or something. It doesn't, obviously, you don't like people picking their nose in your presence. It doesn't mean they deserve to be killed, So we don't really understand this Gemara on a simple level, because there are many rabbis who probably violated this and they're fine and well, and many regular people who violated this and they're fine and well. So it's not to be taken literally. It's a metaphor. Perhaps it's just telling us that in this case, it's an exception to the rule. It's making a very strong statement to tell us, follow Shammai. Now, here's a good question. Why doesn't it just say follow Shammai instead of this crazy example? The answer is because there was kind of a tradition of when you follow Hillel and when you follow Shammai in terms of when you say that, as the rabbis formally say it, or when you just do it. You learn from the story. Maisa hua ikar. You follow the precedent of the story rather than an oral tradition of who the halacha follows. So that's the main answer, and then you have to fill in the blanks. So, for example, that's answer A is we follow the story, and there's a second story that also supports Shammai. So if there's two stories that support Shammai, who are we to argue on these great rabbis and these stories? We're going to follow Shammai. The other second answer is that maybe Hillel agreed with Shammai if you want to. You don't have to. You're not strictly speaking required to. But it's a better if you follow Shammai. And as opposed to the story of the Rabbi Tarfon, where there it was clear that you were following Shammai. Here it's not clear that you're following Shammai. Maybe you just went back as you forgot something. You had to go back for some other reason. So that's like two different answers, but they're kind of related to each other, meaning even Hillel doesn't really totally 100% disagree. It doesn't look like you're going against Hillel. So it's okay to do it, either because it's better to do, or, as we said before, the story indicates you should do it. Okay. So, so we basically find like a 50-50 split amongst the Rishonim, where starting with Tosfos, quoting Reb Amram Gon, they go and I think also the Rush, they go with the team that says that we follow Shammai, and the reason I believe that Tosfos in the name of Amram Gon brings is because look at these stories. The stories show us that Shammai was in fact the way to go. That's on the one camp. The other camp is the Rambam and many others who basically say you follow Hillel, because the law is like Hillel every time, with only a few exceptions. We don't add this to the small list of exceptions. And what should we do today? I believe, let me see if I can find what it says, what the Shulchan Aruch says to do today. That was, give me a moment here. It seems that Maimonides, that the Shulchan Aruch follows the Rambam. But it also seems that the Ramah is okay with the Rush. He brings down the Rush, and in other places he actually rules more in tandem with the Rush that you should go back. Okay? So if you're Ashkenazic, I guess you should make more of an effort to go back. If you're Sephardic, you don't have to make as great an effort. So that's number 6. Number 7 is a story about a golden dove and a rabbi lying or stretching the truth. And what's the story? It's a continuation of number 7, but it's a great, interesting story. There's a name, Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana has a lot of miracle stories and a lot of very interesting things, very wild things. And this is one of them. So the story is that Rabbi Bar Chana was traveling with a caravan, and back then you couldn't leave the caravan. It wasn't safe. You'd get killed. And they stopped. They had a meal. They ate, and in his haste, maybe he didn't. They started going again, and he just totally forgot. And he said to himself, "What should I do? If I tell them, guys, can you stop? I need a few minutes to go back and do the Brachot Hamazon. We'll say, just do it right here. We're not waiting for you." And In fact, they'll say, God can be blessed anywhere. There's a logic to Beis Hillel. So he says, no, I'll tell them that I left a golden dove, a dove made out of gold. And they'll respect that. They'll say, sure, go back and get that. So, in fact, he went back and he did the Birkat HaMazon. And guess what? Of all things, he finds a golden dove. And the Gemara says, why a dove? And the answer is because the Knesset Yisrael is compared to a dove. And it brings a proof text, a verse for that. And just like a dove, it protects itself with its wings, also Israel is protected through the mitzvah. So there's a lot of questions on that. Why would Rabbi Bar Chana follow Beis Shammai? A. B. Why would he lie? And C. What's with the golden dove? So the answer is, according to Reb Amram and Tosfos and the Ramah, because the law is like Beis Shammai. According to the other answer, the other commentaries that don't follow Beis Shammai, Rabbi Bar Chana did it on his own. Rabbi Bar Chana shouldn't have done it, shouldn't have lied, but that was okay for him, not for you. Meaning, you can't look at him and say that's what I'm going to do, because Rabbi Bar Chana, if you know anything about Rabbi Bar Chana, he's just like, you can't compare yourself to him in any way whatsoever, what shape or form. So the fact that he lied is because he didn't lie, because he did go back and he did find a golden dove there. He didn't. It's partially a lie because he didn't forget it there. So here we turn to one of the great Sephardic Kabbalist commentaries on the Talmud, the Ben Yehoyada, and the Ben Yehoyada has the following explanation. He says that we know that the Shekhinah is compared to a dove that's merachefet. It's hovering over its young, and we know that when you do the Birkat HaMazon, just like God sustained you with the food, you sustain the Shekhinah with the blessing you give the Shekhinah. So that being the case, he said, I left a dove, a golden dove. The gold represents the din, the judgment. Probably the judgment of Beis Shammai, that once in a while we listen to Beis Shammai. The judgment of not doing a bracha. A bracha is very important. So the golden dove represents the fact that he left behind the opportunity to take care of the Shekhinah, which is the golden dove. So he wasn't lying. That was his reality. Guess what? Now, people could say his reality has nothing to do with our reality, so it is a lie is a lie. The answer is his reality and our reality actually merged and became together and manifested in the golden dove that he took. Okay, so that's based on the Ben Yehoyada and a little bit of my addition to explain the golden dove actually manifesting. That's kind of my add-on to the Ben Yehoyada. That's number 7. Now, number 8, how long do you have after finishing eating to bench? The simple answer is it's a debate in our Gemara between Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish. And they say different things. Rosh Lakish says that as long as you're still thirsty, because you get thirsty when you eat, from your food, you don't have that you're still in the time frame that the food is still you're still considered like respectable time to do the Birkat HaMazon. Rabbi Yochanan says as long as you don't get hungry again. Now both of these things are very subjective. So basically what the rabbis have come up with is 72 minutes based on a discussion here where Rosh Lakish says to the time that it takes to walk a distance of 4 mil. And that again is the most authorities say that it's 72 minutes. Now the Magen Abraham and others say that actually there could be really 6 hours, like the beginning of digestion is 72 minutes, but the end of digestion is 6 hours. Now obviously you and I know that these are very subjective things, and if you look up medical science, some things take a long time to digest. It depends what it is and how far in the digestive process we're talking about. So what do we do? So the answer is that If within 72 minutes, go ahead and do the benching. If it's after 72 minutes, to be machmer, what you could do is you could make a bracha on a motzi, and then do the benching. So that's one way of being yotz of the chol hadeyot. You can fulfill your obligations to these different things. And there's more on that. And now we're going to go to number 9, which is what's greater, to lead a bracha, to lead the benching, to lead the havdalah, to lead the kiddush, to lead the davening, or to answer amen. And there's actually a debate about that in the Talmud. The Talmud says Rav Huna told his son Rabbah, grab the opportunity to do the bracha. Grab it, like just take it. If there's any hesitancy, just do it. And the question is, Rabbi Yossi says, Gadol ha'ona amen yosef min ha'mavarach. The person who responds amen is greater than the one giving the bracha. So it turns out that there's a debate about this. So the Gemara gives an example of why amen could be seen as greater, which is when there's a war, they would sometimes send out the first group of soldiers that weren't the highly trained, seasoned veterans, the best fighters, and then afterwards, after the regular fighters had gone out, the better fighters would finish the job. So that means that the amen, in a sense, are the regular people lead the charge, and the best follow up and clean it up. Okay, what does that really mean for us today? And I was thinking that so much of the prayer leader is not about the leader, it's about the followers. There's this great YouTube, I think it's a TED Talk, where the guy talks about the importance of following. Because everybody thinks it's like all about leading. You got to lead. You got to be a leader. You got to innovate. You got to have followers. Well, guess what? The first and second follower of somebody are like more important than the leader. Because the leader without those followers wouldn't be a leader. So without the amen, it wouldn't be a bracha. It wouldn't be. I mean, it would be a private bracha, but it wouldn't be something that's getting amplified by the audience. So let's remember the value of listening, responding, attentiveness, creating a space for something isn't always all about being the recognized leader, but sometimes it is. So that's a debate. It might depend for who. So that's number 9. Number 10 is the Gemara concludes with a beautiful conclusion of chapter 8 of Brachot. Tana, Viskadashtem, let's see, what is it? What is the words exactly? We say the following. It's a beautiful teaching from Vayikra. It says, I'll read first the verses to you. It says, Ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am the Lord your God. V'iskadashtem v'yisim kadoshim. You should sanctify yourself and you should be holy. Ki kadosh ani, for I am holy. And another verse says, V'iskadashtem v'yisim kadoshim ki ani Hashem Elokeichem. You should sanctify yourself and be holy because I am the Lord your God. Just keep that in mind. So we have this idea of sanctifying yourself and also being holy in addition to the original sanctification. So it's the second level of like being holy. Like one is active and the other one is passive. The second one is passive. And then the third thing is God is holy. So let's read it like this. V'skadashtem, you should actively participate in creating holiness in your own life. Elu mayim rishonim. That's when you wash your hands until yadayim before you eat the bread. V'yisim kadoshim elu mayim achronim. And you should be holy, which I said before is like a continuation of that holiness. That is the mayim achronim, when you wash your hands at the end before the grace after meal. Ki kadosh ani, ki kadosh, because I am the Lord, I am holy. That's the oil. They used to put oil on themselves, on their hands to clean off even better. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am the Lord your God. That's the bracha. That's the bracha hamazon. Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin explains the following. There's two levels initially of Kedusha. One is when I make myself holy, and then the second is once I make myself holy, an additional holiness descends upon me, even above and beyond. It's just like I make myself the vessel for that holiness, and it just kind of like becomes part of who I am. So if you think about it, washing of the hands represents so much more than washing physically to clean yourself. What it represents is to remove certain attractions and personality traits that we have that lead us in the direction that we don't want to go in. And we got to clarify, washing represents analyzing and finding the right solution to what we should do in any given situation. So the first hand washing is active Kedusha. The second hand washing is more like once I started the process, it'll go much further than even I can anticipate, because that's the way it works. And then the final thing, the bracha, is ki kadosh ani Hashem Elohechem, because the holiness is coming from God's holiness, and at that point you just not only are you making a blessing and blessing God, but you're like increasing the divine energy, as that's the big thing in the Baal Shem Tov and Kabbalah, through your blessing. So hopefully that we can work on our lives and be blessings and make great things out of our life. Have a great day.